So my name is Raphi Bloom. I'm one of the co-founders of TotallyJewishTravel, which is the largest kosher year-round travel website on the internet. And I am delighted to be here with Kosher Travelers, with CEO David Wallace, who runs the company alongside his wife, Chana. And we're here to talk to you about Pesach programs, everything that goes into them, the challenges that they face, the issues around running them. There's been a lot of talk lately about a program, particularly in Morocco, that suffered from a lot of problems. And it seems that, every so often these issues arise with programs. So we thought at Totally Jewish Travel that it would be a great opportunity to talk to someone who is one of the leaders in the kosher travel industry, somebody who's been doing this for many, many years, decades, in fact. And actually, as it so happens, David might not remember this, but I do. But our relationship goes back way before, or our connection goes back way before we were both in the kosher travel industry, because I remember my best friend at the time, I think it was in 1988 or 89, was in yeshiva in Gush Etzion, and I was in Kerem B'Yavneh, and I think you roomed with him, and that's the first time that we met. So we're talking
about JB?
You were talking about JB, correct?
Leave it at that.
Talking about JB, and that was 1988.
Oh,
so I can't even do the maths now, but it was a long, long time ago.
We were kids.
We were kids. We were babies. We were 18 or 19 at the time. So, as I said, it's great to be here with David, with Kosher Travelers. So I think the best thing to do is let's just kick off with you telling us a bit about Kosher Travelers, your history, your ethos, what you offer, and how did you get into this business?
Sure. First of all, Raphi, it's great to reconnect. And being that I have been marketing and advertising with your platform and portal for over probably 15 years at least. In fact, that sort of segues into our history. We actually made Aliyah from Australia in 2008. And already back then, I was running a Pesach hotel under the brand Aussie Kosher Getaways. And I remember I was already advertising with you back then. So we're talking over 20 years. Kosher Travelers was formerly Eddie's Travel and Tourism, founded by the Freudman family from London. I don't know if you knew them personally. Did you?
Well, the just to play a bit of Jewish geography, Eddie Freudman, Oliver Shalom, who was a mensch of a guy, a really, really honest, decent, kind man, actually went to school with my mother in London. So there's the connection that goes back
Jewish
a long time. Yeah,
at its best. I always say, if you haven't found the connection, just keep talking, you'll get there, right?
Yeah.
So Eddie, I'd never met him. Eddie had passed away a year before we made Aliyah. That's 2007. And his family wanted to exit. They were not really cut out or wanted to carry on in this industry. And we were looking to get into it. Having run Pesach as a hobby, as a sidekick, as a hustle business back down in Australia for 5 years prior to making Aliyah.
You were in the security business, weren't you?
Yeah, and Shopfront Securities. Wow, very good. Company name was Global Security back at the time.
That's right.
And we figured that if we can make a go of running a travel and tourism business in Israel that is more than just Pesach centric and gives us something to keep busy all year round, then that would be something very exciting to get into. And, heaven did its job and the dots connected, and we were introduced to the Freudman family, the kids, the children who wanted to exit, and we bought that business. Literally hit the ground running in 2008 from Israel, in Israel already in the city of Modi'in, where we settled back then. The advantage wasn't, people ask me till today, like, why did you buy? Why didn't you just come and start on your own here? It opened a lot of doors. It created a lot of contacts. It gave us a lot of credibility, and we did hit the ground running with existing contracts, and we've never looked back. Obviously, we've been through a hell of a roller coaster ride, I would say, with the 2009 recession. The ink wasn't even dry on all the paperwork with the contracts between us, and the major recession hit, and even people that could afford to travel were cutting back. So that was our first introduction to the volatility of this industry. And then, not to mention, COVID, and then living in Israel with wars and October 7th and since. And so it's been a roller coaster, but we're still here to tell the tale. We enjoy doing what we're doing. We're passionate about it. My kids are now involved on and off, especially during Pesach. I've told them all, go get your careers, cut your teeth elsewhere, but you're always welcome to help us out over Pesach. And that's allowed us to scale and to expand and to do things really professionally because the kids have really grown up in the business. And of course, we have an amazing team of staff, of marketing, of sales, of admin, and all those components are very important when running a business. That's sort of the background. Our ethos, I would say, if you look at our logo, there are 3 words there that are very meaningful, and we came up with them about 10 years ago. They are connect, discover, and enrich. Okay. And they are there because they are our mission statement, essentially. They encapsulate our mission statement. And for every single project that we do, not just hotels for Pesach, we run tours all over the world, we run cruises. If we cannot fulfill those 3 words and enable participants to connect with one another, to discover the world around them, the cultural history, geography, the Jewish connection, and at the same time walk away enriched from whether it's having scholars in residence or amazing lectures on board or meeting local president of a Jewish community. If we're in a town where there's a Jewish history, we'll make that effort. Then we won't sit out and do the project because it doesn't take, it's not rocket science to provide food and shelter accommodation, right? It's the added factor, that added value that I think people appreciate and keep coming back and travel with us again. They walk away, make friends a lifetime. And in today's global connectivity with WhatsApp groups on every single tour and cruise and hotel that we do, people stay friends. And when people travel without us, they will reconnect and have reunions and that sort of thing. And that's important. And that keeps us excited about this business. So that's it in a nutshell.
And I think it's incredible because you talk about that connectivity and that the world really is nowadays a global village. But I often get asked when journalists come to me and say, talk about the kosher travel industry, talk about the way it's developed. And I remember when we started off Totally Jewish Travel in 1999, right at the beginning of the internet boom. And you think about what was going on then, and you think about now, and you think about how you can go anywhere in the world now. You can have the best kosher food, to the highest level of kashrut and of quality. You can stay in the best accommodations. You can have the best guides. There really is no reason now why anybody who's a kosher observant Jew cannot experience global travel on the way that in a way that anybody else could previously. And I think we see like you mentioned, Pesach we'll come on to Pesach shortly, but Pesach is one part of what you do. It's a big part of what you do, but you also operate throughout the year and you run a multitude of tours to, interesting and exotic places. I think you did run a kosher cruise to Antarctica at the back end of last year, which is phenomenal. So I would definitely encourage anybody to check out the range of tours that you offer, because you can literally see the world in style, keeping kosher, but with reliability as well. And I think that brings us on, I think, really to the sort of the topic of this conversation, which is Pesach and Pesach programs. And again, we've seen the explosion of Pesach programs over the last 10 or 15 or indeed 20 years. But even going back from when they first started, when it was just sort of the Catskills and that area, and then they expanded, to the continental USA, and then they started to branch further afield. And then you have the situation today where, you can go and spend Pesach anywhere in Europe, anywhere across, North America, even South America, on safari, in Africa, in Morocco, in South Africa, in Thailand, in Vietnam, places like that. But one of the things that obviously people spend a lot of money on these programs. They spend a lot. The price ranges, and again, we'll talk in more detail about later, but the price ranges at the top end could be $12,500 to $15,000 a person. So anywhere from $25,000 to $30,000 a couple. And not necessarily every year, but there are frequently 1 or 2 programs that make the headlines for the wrong reasons. Because they close down right before Pesach and they leave people high and dry, or people go there and the organizers have not provided or planned for enough food or for enough just basically they've not provided properly for the guests that they're going to have. And sometimes the program closes halfway through. Sometimes people go without food. There's always an issue like that. And what I want to say is that from my experience, the vast majority of Pesach program operators are honest, decent people who are there, of course, to make a living, but also to provide, like you said, a meaningful and enriching Pesach program for their guests. But I think what would really help listeners understand the Pesach program industry is for you to tell us what goes into making a successful Passover program, the planning, the location, the hotel, the food, the staffing, the program, all that needs to happen. When does it start to happen? When do you start to plan? How do you sort of implement it? What are the pitfalls? And what goes into making, what differentiates a really successful, reputable program like yours to some of the horror stories that we hear?
Sure. So before I launch into that, I just want to touch on the topic that you brought up a little earlier, and that is the availability and accessibility of kosher food. And at the same time, then, if that's the case, and one can just Google, Chabad around the world, and you'll find restaurants. So what is special then, again, about traveling with kosher travelers? So first of all, if it's people that are young, like us, young guys, young people that are still adventurous and are able to maneuver and navigate and have a sense of adventure, I'll be the first to encourage them. You're not ready to travel with kosher travelers, especially the tours to places like Japan and India and like you mentioned, Antarctica and Peru and Portugal and Dubai and Havana, Cuba and Vietnam. All these places are off the beaten track. And, unless you're going with a group tour, it's very hard to navigate. So that's just putting that into perspective. So we're not for everybody, but at the same time, we add the value for people that want an A to Z cookie cutter, solution, don't want to have to break their heads, don't want to have to start searching and figuring out what's the distance from the hotel to the kosher restaurant on Shabbat and how far do I have to walk, et cetera, et cetera. If let's just pivot to Pesach for a moment. And in answer to your comments there, I'd say the following. First of all, we have seen a proliferation of programs, as you mentioned, which I think is fantastic. I think it's great. It's great for the industry. It's great for a portal like yourselves that promotes it. It gives people options. It's an industry that's grown over the last 20 years, right? Talk about the pool. Yeah, talk about the pool, the number of people that are potential Pesach goers, Pesach family participants that will fork out that sort of money, ranging in that budget that you mentioned, from small to large. The pool has grown. The Orthodox Jewish community worldwide has grown. The traditional Jewish community, especially a program like Kosher Travelers, where we attract a multi-generational family, and you'll have the head of the family, and he no matter what the kids are like, and if one is across the spectrum of the Jewish rainbow, right? One wears a kippah, one does not. One has a tattoo, one doesn't. One speaks English, one doesn't. At the end of the day, that's what Seder is all about, right? In the Haggadah, bringing all the four sons together, and even the fifth one that's missing. So, that's what makes Pesach, in particular, special and very highly sought after demand around the world, over and above all the other tours that we do. The other thing I would mention is the fact that if people plan enough ahead, then it can be the one time in the year where it's a family reunification, where kids and grandkids want to be together with their cousins, and the grandparents will invest that money. And I call it an investment in your family. And I tell the grandparents, and I take my hat off to them, right? Because they are pouring thousands of dollars into their family dynamic. And often they don't have another opportunity, whether, the grandparents have downsized, they just simply don't have the space in their apartment in Florida or wherever they are, or in Israel and Jerusalem, or in South Africa or wherever. And so the only way to really bring the family together is over a Pesach program. Again, a tour, you're running and you're packing and unpacking, you're going from one city to the next. At a Pesach hotel, you settle down, often there for a minimum of 10 days. This year was 12 days. Next year's 12 days again because you have the Shabbat after. And so it is an incredible opportunity for families to reconnect with quality time, with Chag, where there's generally no cell phones, over incredible food, with a beautiful environment, where the kids have activities throughout the days. If it's a well-organized program, from every single age group, they've got activities there. So everybody's kept occupied, but then you reunify and reconnect at meal times. And that is it's something that you can't put a price on. And we understand here in my office and Kosher Travelers, my wife and I, that is key, because if you can offer a family more, again, like I said earlier, more than just the food, more than just the shelter, because that's basics, but you offer a fully encapsulated environment that's engaging for every age level, then that's number one. That's number one in our books as to what a Pesach program should look like. And there are many operators that do that. There are a lot of pop-ups that rock up year on year and think, well, it's an easy job. I just got to order the food and find a nice hotel, and that's it. So, okay, so we hear those stories, as you referenced earlier, and it could be that they didn't look at the zoom out picture, what I call. And when one looks for a hotel, if you ask me what the secret sauce is or the recipe is, imagine you've got a spreadsheet with 100 lines and 100 boxes, and the hotel and the environment has to tick 99 out of 100 boxes to enable a Pesach program to occur on that premises and on that property. Because if it doesn't tick those boxes, then it's a non-starter, right? You've got to
what are some of those boxes?
Some of those boxes, great. So it's location, distance from the airport. Are you on the beach? Are you in the mountains? What size hotel is it? How many rooms does it have? Is it you need economies of scale to run a business, to have a minimum number of people and a maximum number of people? What sort of public areas does the hotel have? Does it have conference rooms? Does it have lobby areas? Is it well lit up? What sort of other ancillary services they have, such as a spa? How close is it to the main tourist areas? I'll give you an example. Our hotel, the Elysium in Rhodes, where we've now run 4 Pesachs in a row, and we have no intention of leaving. And one of the first questions we get asked every year at the end by guests who are there, and even have been repeat guests, say to us, David or Chana, where are you taking us next year? So my answer is, we're going to be here. We may open another hotel if we find a hotel that ticks 99 out of 100 boxes. There's no such thing as perfect, okay? But you want it as close as possible. And at worst case, you'll take a walk, you'll go somewhere else to another good operator, and you'll tell your friends, and we're here to stay, and I'll tell you why. Because the investment time, energy, effort that we put in to working with management and staff, and that is the other big key behind the scenes, without that, you don't have a program. If your management and staff are not on board.
Are these hotels fully bought out, or are they are they a full buyout, or are you taking the whole hotel over, or are you using just some rooms?
No, so we will only do a total buyout. Okay. And again, that means finding the right size, the right, facilities, location, etc. And I'll tell you why, because the last thing you want are people of another faith walking around on Pesach, not understanding what we're doing there. We look different. It just doesn't mixing oil and water. It just doesn't work. It's a non-starter as far as I'm concerned. I know there are programs that do that, but I think it's not a great experience for the guests. Once you've found the right hotel, then operations kicks in, okay? And you need to have a great team. You need to have a team that understands catering, that understands inventory, that understands ordering, that understands logistics, timing. All these things are critical, and they all have to line up like a perfect storm, right? That comes together in a very, very short period of time. It's such a complex operation because there are 1,000 moving parts that have to come together in a perfect storm in a very short period of time. And at the same time, at the front end, we as operators, we're under pressure, so to speak, to sell a product that has a very finite expiry date, right? And so it all has to come together. So you ask the question, when does an operator who's worth his salt start thinking about Pesach? My answer is the day after the Pesach ends. And I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you.
I believe that, yeah.
Right? I mean, already 2027, the hotel we work with already has the dates locked in. Okay. The staff, if they were great, and only if they were great, I'm talking about the kitchen staff and the best chefs and the best conditors and hot kitchen and cold kitchen, and you need everything, right? If they were great, then you sign them up already for the next year. Okay. If some of your scholars were fantastic, inspiring and engaging, I'll lock them in for the next year. Okay. Because if they're in high demand, I want to be the first one to have them there. And you know, at the same time, we do shake things up from year to year. You can't be repetitive, especially when it comes to entertainment and music and mentalists and magicians and all that sort of thing. But we've got a base recipe that is in place, and then from year to year, I won't say it gets easier. It just gets. I'll give you an example. I mean, by our 4th year for the hotel in Rhodes, we didn't even have to forget the fact that there was a war and there weren't direct flights, but we had 3 Zooms with the management and staff, and we were done, and we rocked up and ready to go.
But does that help the fact that you are, this is now, you said, you know, you've done 4 years at where you were and you're going to go back again. Presumably you warehouse your crockery, your cutlery, all your equipment and all that, so it's there. Correct. You have you understand the logistics of shipping in your containers of food from wherever that might come from in Europe or in Israel. You know where you're going to house your staff, for example, because I presume you bring them in and you house them perhaps off-site somewhere, that not necessarily in the hotel itself. But all that helps you. I suppose where perhaps some of the issues can arise is where an operator is going to a new country, to a new location. You know, for example, one of the stories that came out of the Morocco debacle was that there was a container of matzah and wine and other stuff that was held up at customs, and there were rumors of a $60,000 fee being required, etc., and it delayed it. Do you find that, well, first of all, it must be that being in the same place year after year helps, but also perhaps are there, you know, we were talking before we came on air that we listened to a podcast that another operator in America, and he said, you know, he loves the fact that he's in America. If he needs anything and he's in America, he can go to New York and get it. And if it's not available in New York, he'll go to Miami, or he'll go here, or he'll go there. Presumably, operating in Europe as you do it, within the European Union, etc., gives you an ability to understand that you're operating within a set of norms that where things won't happen that could happen in other locations around the world.
Look, 100%. I mean, first of all, yes, we do store from year to year at this hotel close to 20 pallets of equipment and you know, dishware and crockery and you know, stuff that's used for cosmetic, etc., down to the Aron Kodesh and the bima. Okay, when we set up the shul, so that stays at the hotel, and that's a wonderful part of being able to work year in, year out with the same hotel. Again, if I had to break my head every year and ship that around, A, it's very costly. B, you know, you still don't know what you're going to get at the other end. So you know, having heard those podcasts and those fiascos, my takeaway was the following. The biggest takeaway was that even if you're an experienced operator and you've been around the block, opening up a new hotel, okay, even if you've had experience, I would tell the general community to beware, even if it's an experienced operator starting a new hotel that year, because that year, whatever it is, it's the first time that hotel is operating Pesach. So it's one thing that the entrepreneur like ourselves putting a Pesach together, but it's complicated enough. And when you're dealing with a new hotel that has never done Pesach, Forget about elementary kosher 101. You got to teach them Pesach 101. They think you're crazy from another planet. And you know, it's so difficult. I mean, to the point where I've trained my management and staff, they call Leil HaSeder, they call it Gala Night. They know the days that we have a Kiddush. Okay, they know what time the Kiddush is after the Tefillah, because the Tefillah is longer on a Shabbat and a Chag than it is on a Chol HaMoed, and they know the differences, and they already, you know, they put that whole schedule together before I even have to, you know, talk about next year. They get it. And so, but if you have to start explaining that from the get-go, yeah, go for it. But number one, you're going to face an uphill battle. Number two, like you mentioned, if you're in a geographic location that is far from an existing Jewish community and infrastructure and supply line, then again, you're stacking the odds against you, because many things can go wrong. And if you don't have a backup plan B, plan C, plan D, that's why fiascos in Morocco happen.
Yeah, although it is important to mention that there are a number of programs in Morocco that have been doing it for years, that have been running it excellent. White and Blue, Sarah's Tours, etc., have been doing it for years. You know, and I think in this particular instance, there were a number of issues that all came together. But I take your point that knowing your location, knowing your supply lines, knowing your partner, as in the hotel, knowing the area in which you're operating in, you know, the norms of that area really make a big difference to running smoothly. But and all that, obviously, you know, you mentioned entertainment, scholars in residence, you know, kids clubs and the food. All that sort of plays into price. And we know, as we said earlier, that there are some programs that charge $25,000, $30,000 a couple, and there are some programs that might charge $6,000 a couple. And obviously, when somebody, you know, and we always say that, you know, the companies that advertise on Totally Jewish Travel, there's a budget, or there's a price to meet every budget for Pesach. But perhaps just explain to the people watching this why there is such a big difference. I mean, some of it will be obvious, but some of it won't. And what it means when you have such a big price difference. What are you getting? What are you not getting?
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with the high-end price ticket items. Okay. And I think that mainly attaches themselves to the high-end American and maybe even Mexican resort style hotels. You're talking about massive resorts, golf clubs, spas, you know, 300, 400 room hotels. They are huge. Okay. The overhead and the investment that is the fixed costs that go into running a program on that scale are huge. Okay, not to mention that the prices in America are high to begin with. I'll add the following, that in America, April time, which is generally Pesach, although this year was late March, is early spring, and it's still a high demand in places like Florida and Mexico. So you're doing a buyout at a time when the hotel is not necessarily encouraged to sell out their hotel to an operator when they could have full occupancy or close to during a normal season. The difference in Europe is that most of the hotels, a lot of the hotels, especially the island hotels, especially the hotels that I work with, are closed for tourism during winter. And they open their season.
So you mean the Greek islands or the Italian, you know, those sort of island hotels?
Yeah, exactly. And so what happens is they're closed anyway. There are no flights to these islands, so you can't even go there if you want to. The main hotels are closed down. And so when we come in and offer a buyout, it's just pre-season. So we buy it it's all about price. Going back to your question, it's all about price, what you're paying for the hotel as an operator to begin with, not to mention all the other costs that go along. But your base product is your hotel. And if you're able to buy that at a price, then you're able to pass that price on to the end user. If you're paying $600 a night for a hotel room and multiply that out exponentially over hundreds of rooms times 10 or 12 nights, right, then you have to charge $12,000, $15,000, right, for a room, whether it's for a often the Americans call us and they'll go, we quote them a price of €7,000, and they go, what is that per person or is that per double? We go, no, it's per double. And they can't believe it. because Americans are used to paying a very high price, and it's justified. So, the market, I think, can afford it. The American market can afford and are used to splurging, and maybe even more affluent. I don't know. We don't know anybody's, personal finances, but the money's there. It's a bigger market, and there's a wider pool. Whereas in Europe, you're restricted to UK, Belgium, Dutch, few people, and then Anglos living in Israel,
Yeah.
mostly retirees. Okay, and then you're talking about places like Canada, Australia, and South Africa, where their currency, okay, compared to the euro, is not really fantastic. So they're feeling the pinch. And so we pitch ourselves, if you're asking us personally, we pitch ourselves at a middle market where we add value, okay? And rather than you get what you pay for, we use a slogan, you get more than what you pay for. And that's what we like to offer. And so I think that sort of gives a bit of an explanation as to the price differentials there.
I mean,
If you want,
does the cost of entertainment of scholars in residence, the bigger names, obviously that must play into that as well, because you have to give
yeah,
these people rooms and you have to bring their families with. And so, if you've got the big influencers, for example, a lot of the American programs have that are coming to do PR for the program, and obviously they need rooms, or you have, a leading, I don't know, celebrity, and, a Douglas Murray or somebody like that, then obviously,
yeah.
there are costs associated with that, and that also plays into it, right?
Of course. And if you're charging $15,000, then there's no reason you can't afford more or less those high ticket entertainers, and you should be delivering, right? People on our European programs don't expect that. Number one, I feel that a lot of these people are very accessible. The guy Douglas Murray is traveling the world. You can hear him in
Yeah.
almost every city throughout the year. You can watch a podcast every 5 minutes. He's amazing. A guy like YY Jacobson, okay, in the rabbinic world, or Gad Elbaz, or what's the guy, Yishai Ribo, right? I mean, they're a fortune of money. And I feel that is unjustified. And it's for one night, I'd have to charge way more. And people don't just come for that. So I bring, the guys like Ohad, or we had this year Yossi Schwartz, who's an amazing musical maestro. I look for guys who are still, a little more modest. They're not the greatest celebs in town, and at the end of the day, it's still providing wonderful entertainment, and they're friendly, and they hang around the dining room, and they're approachable. I'm not just flying them in and out for one night, and the whole surrounding paparazzi and celeb atmosphere. They're part of our program. Yes, they get a barter. They come, they get a room or two, depending who they are, where they're coming from, etc. But they add more value. A guy who's doing a concert, I would expect him to get up in shul and sing a beautiful Mishe Berach for Tzal, right? And bring everybody together. So it's finding those guys who can add that extra value.
And obviously, the big thing about going on a Pesach program is the food. You know, you know, and we see at Totally Jewish Travel, incredible videos that you guys put out and other program operators put out, amazing barbecues and the buffets and everything. I mean, how much planning do you put into your menus, into your food procurement? When does that start?
Sure.
Do you bring in your own chefs from Israel or from Europe? Do you bring in your own kitchen staff? I've heard people say, you don't want to rely on the hotel staff. You want to have your own staff because then you're in control. I mean, just talk a bit about how that whole process.
Sure, 100%. So the last thing we would do is rely on the hotel staff, kitchen staff specifically, to prepare kosher food, because they have no idea what kosher is. So any program that does not fly in their own staff from head to toe, okay, I bring in 16 staff members, and that's excluding the team of mashgichim and hashgacha that you need. Obviously, they can't be local. So I look for the best in the industry, okay? Because at the end of the day, you can make a chicken soup, and you can make a fabulous chicken soup. You're going to have a buffet full of desserts that look ordinary, and one that looks that makes you say that you go wow every time you walk up to it, 12 days in a row, and you want to be able to do it, right? So that's what I look for. And the planning starts, as I mentioned already, the day after the next Pesach. And that's where we're already, filtering and double checking. Now, the staff that we do use from the hotel is fantastic for, grunge jobs, right? Whether it's peeling potatoes and chopping vegetables and the cleaning work, that's so in the hygiene. That's the hotel. That's what they offer. And that's fantastic. And then on top of that, some of them do actually get involved in kosher cooking and they enjoy it. So if we find some talent there, we'll make sure to put them to work as well.
Is it easy? Not easy. Can you make a decent profit from running a Pesach program? Do some of the newbies think this is a golden ticket? Let's jump in because we're going to make a fortune. What are your profit margins? Does that only happen in the second, third, fourth year? How does the financial side of it work?
Sure. So look, first of all, I would say nothing's easy. Nothing comes easy. Okay. And if you know what you're doing and you're professional and you're honest and you deliver and you under promise and over deliver, then you've got a good starting point. Okay. In terms of profitability and margin, we don't need to go into that, but at the end of the day, yes, it is a parnassah. It is our family income. It's what we live off, for the year, but we put in a year's work, right? We employ staff, we run marketing, we advertise with TotallyJewishTravel and other platforms throughout the year. All the other stuff that we do, actually, by the way, we do it for the fun of it. I do it because I get bored very quickly, and I like being active, and I like travel. So we've got a tour coming up in 2 weeks for 38 people to Japan. Again, we've got that down to a T, and that's running. But at the end of the day, the real trick and the unknown factor is where one can get caught out. What am I saying? Is that what you don't know is really what you don't know. In other words, there are so many unknowns, especially if you're starting up, that you will never have planned for the unknown. And a guy in Morocco who didn't plan, and perhaps, I don't know what the reason, he didn't have matzah or wine, but that's frankly inexcusable. Okay. I don't care where he is on the planet. If he's running a Pesach program and does not and cannot supply and guarantee matzah and wine on the first night seder, he should not be in the business. It is inappropriate. It's unfair. It's unreasonable. And he should be refunding everybody and stay out of the business. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to go a remote place, then you've got to have plan B, C, and D in place. So that even if your container comes from Israel and Trump declares war on Iran and you didn't foresee it, I didn't foresee that. Believe you me, we had to pivot 1,000 times in the last 2 months from 28th of February, more than ever before. I will mention it was probably the hardest ever season that we've dealt with. Okay. But given that we've had experience, we knew how to deal with it. And we dealt with the waves of cancellations and bookings and nonstop. We had people who were booked to come to Israel who couldn't get in and pivoted to come to our hotels in Greece. We had people who wanting to unite with their families in Greece and had families from Israel trying to get out of the country and couldn't get in. Okay. We had others who, so that you can't help that, right? If you're stuck in Israel and you're stuck in Greece and you're not going to be together with your family, we can't resolve that. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to pivot and offer solutions and think on your feet. And the profit, it's not our number one goal. At the end of the day, as I mentioned to you, we're there to have guests discover, connect, and enrich. The money comes later. It comes with experience. It comes with professionalism. Comes with understanding economies of scale and knowing not to cut corners, but understanding where you can be wise in what you spend and do it in a way that actually adds value to the guests without going crazy when it comes to spending money. So, there are ways to do it. That comes with experience, I guess.
You touched on the war with Iran, and I was going to ask you about that because you and I both remember very well COVID, and when COVID in 2020 hit, 2 weeks, literally 2 weeks before Pesach, and programs, obviously the whole world shut down. I mean, different scenario to the Iran war, but and people were screaming they wanted their money back. And I remember we, as Totally Jewish Travel, we spent a lot of time trying to explain to our users, the people who use our platform to sort of research and book programs, to say, look, this is something nobody could see coming. And a lot of programs did the right thing. They refunded or they gave credit. Some people didn't, and it caused a lot of there was a lot of toing and froing. In terms of what happened, this Pesach with Iran, as you just said, you had to pivot, multiple times to try and do that. What's your reading of how it affected? Obviously, how it affected your program, but how do you feel it affected? Because one of the things that we saw, for example, was that a lot of people were going back to Israel for Pesach this year. For the first time since October the 7th, 2023, Israel was open properly for Pesach. And I know you run a number of hotels in Israel for Pesach as well. And I think there was a genuine excitement. People were like going back to Israel with a vengeance almost. They were so pleased to be going back. And then all of a sudden, Israel closed down. There were programs in Europe that couldn't get staff out of Israel, perhaps couldn't get food out of Israel. There were people going to Israel that then pivoted. I was speaking to another client who had chartered a flight from Taba to get people to his program in Europe. You've spoken about how it affected you, but it absolutely, those hotels operating within your neighborhood of Greece and Southern Europe, there was a lot of impact, wasn't there? And the hotels in Israel.
Totally. So first of all, there were a number of programs that actually shut down and canceled, because the bulk of their clientele were coming from Israel. So if you're an operator in Israel, you can't get your staff out, you can't get your guests out, even on charter flights, and you're not running a charter flight, 5 or 6 planes from Taba for 600 people, okay? Because that is absolutely reckless to do something like that. And the smart operators shut down and called it a day, sent everybody home, refunded them, and we'll start again next year, okay? In my case, particularly, 75 to 80% of our clientele are from outside of Israel, and a further 20 or 25% are from Israel, albeit English speakers. That's our audience. That's our demographic.
That's the European hotels, correct? Because I also want you to talk about what happened to your Israeli hotels as well. But talk about Europe first.
Yeah. So first of all, they call them, when one invests, you want to hedge your bets. Okay.
Yeah.
So, turns out that by us having 2 hotels in Israel, we take over the Nofkin Osar Hotel on the Kinneret. It's our 10th year there. It's a gorgeous hotel. It's been renovated recently on the Kinneret. And like you said, people were coming back with a vengeance, with kids in Israel. We sold 200 out of 225 rooms were sold out already by Hanukkah this year for Nofkin Osar.
Wow.
When the war broke out, it was touch and go whether this hotel is going to stay open. And the biggest issue was whether the Pikuda Oref, what's it in English? Got a blank. The home front security command allow X number of people to gather if there's a missile coming in from the north. Imagine you're going to a hotel for Pesach and you've got to be concerned, will I be able to make it to the shelter in time? Anyway, the bottom line is literally a week before they pulled the plug on it. Already those people that couldn't get into Israel canceled on their own. Already families that were had kids living in Israel and the parents weren't coming canceled on their own. The last remaining ones that were coming anyway because they lived in Israel and wanted a break from running to the shelter for the past 4 weeks and were looking forward to a Pesach, the hotel was instructed to close down because they may not have been able to handle the number of people in the shelters. So that was that. But then on the other hand, we had the Inbal Hotel in Jerusalem, where we've had a wonderful relationship for many years, and we sell rooms and we run a program there. It's not a fully loaded program. It's a program with a very prominent rabbi. This year we had Rabbi Meish Tarragon, and he attracts many people. And that's it, because Jerusalem in itself has so much to offer. Entertainment every night, you can't compete with that.
Yeah.
So we had 2 hotels in Israel. We had 2 hotels in Europe. We had the hotel in Rhodes for our 4th year. We did open up a hotel for the first year outside of Athens, okay, which we sold out. And even though it was our first year at that hotel, but I'll tell you why we felt we could do it. First of all, we wanted to cater for those who had been with us multiple times in Rhodes, and they said to us, well, offer us something else. Second of all, it's a hotel run by an Israeli company called Fatal. So that already the management know what Pesach is. It's already a head start. I'm talking in Hebrew to the top management, okay, and then in Greek or in broken English to the the local staff and management. But it already ticks 99 out of the 100 boxes I was talking about earlier. So again, by having 2 hotels in Europe, 2 hotels in Israel, we were able to offer multiple solutions for families in a very, very complicated and intensely pressured environment where people had to make quick decisions. And literally up to the night before, without exaggeration, the night before, we still had bookings and cancellations. We've never had that, where you're talking about having to set up, room lists have to be perfect. Table settings have to be perfect. And you're still changing and chopping up to the night before, and that's where my wife comes in. She's amazing with her team, and maybe there's an opportunity to have Chana say a few words.
Absolutely.
Who is my not only my business partner, my life partner, and I could not do this business without her. And she'll share some of her quick few words,
Raphi.
a bit of passion.
Hey, Raphi. Hi, everybody. I think I'm great. What's up? I think David said most of everything. A couple of things I wanted to add, which I think are important overall. So first of all, David talked about families getting together. Something else that's been a wonderful spin-off, and we feel so privileged to be able to facilitate it, as shidduchim, whether it's families meeting someone and then someone suggesting someone for a nephew. We've had shadchanim as part of our staff, guests meeting each other. We once had a wonderful story we took a group to Poland, and this older couple, one was a widow and a widower, met each other. We joked they met at Auschwitz, but they're still married, Baruch Hashem, today. Some of our staff have made shidduchim with clients. So Baruch Hashem, that's a wonderful spin-off. And also, David didn't mention, but we aim every year to raise money for a nominated tzedakah. So the last 2 years, we raised an ambu cycle for United Hatzalah here in Israel. And this year, we started to raise money we raised over 50, so that was 40 grand for the ambu cycle of Hatzalah. And so far, we've raised over 50,000 euros for a mikveh in Rhodes. Rhodes currently does not have a ladies' mikveh, so the rabbi's been busy fundraising. We've been helping him, and please God, we will be able to see that come to fruition. So that's just people give at the aliyot, at the bima. We have pledge forms. And so that's also part of what we do, the giving and helping our communities.
It's interesting, actually. David mentioned, and it'd be interesting to get your take on it. He mentioned, and I hear this a lot from different programs. You get a lot of families with what they call blended families now. Like David said, you have a grandchild or a child. Somebody's from, somebody's not so from. But again, it's that family coming together. Maybe they always used to go to the grandparents' house, and maybe one of the kids has become more dati than perhaps the grandparents. And so this is a way to bring them together. And I think that's a beautiful thing to focus on, because it is that family time around a chag in a great location, and you probably see more of that, correct?
So it's 100% correct, Raphi. It's actually one of the things that people should ask when they inquire about a Pesach program. They should ask about what type of crowd it is, because even if you're from just your whole family is cohesive, but how do you know if the rest of the people are similar to your crowd? First of all, everybody speak English. That's important. Second of all, we as a company, we don't advertise in French, we don't advertise in Ivrit, and we don't advertise in the Haredi newspapers. So we attract a more modern Orthodox crowd. And also the level of kashrut also filters out people. I think also people should ask about the swimming. You know, some people will only go to a program that only has separate swimming. We have mixed and separate, and we explain that in our program. So back to the families, it's important that everybody should feel comfortable. So if you have a family that have people from various shades of the Jewish spectrum, that everybody should feel comfortable. And thankfully, within our program, it's worked out that everybody feels comfortable. Sometimes, and again, I don't like to label, but sometimes you may have a person who is less religious, and he or she may not feel comfortable if they go to a more Haredi type of program.
Yeah.
And if you're more Haredi, you may not feel so comfortable if you are in a place where maybe not every lady covers her hair, or maybe some of the ladies wear pants and so on. You know, so everybody should feel comfortable. So we sort of call our program Modern Hamish, but again, it's important that people should ask that question.
I think it's interesting you mentioned that, because we're running out of time, so we're about to sort of draw this to a close. But I wanted to say that I think it's really important when people look at programs, how do they judge it? You know, if you're going to a program that's run by a non-English speaking company, you know, you have to check, is the kids club in English as well, or is it only going to be in French or Hebrew or Spanish, for example?
Correct.
You know, are there going to be Sephardi and Ashkenazi minyanim, for example?
Minyanim, yes.
You know, that's also really important for people to ask. So there's a lot of things that people should need to check out. And again, the reliability of the program, you know, ask the operators for previous names of guests, because if you're a reliable operator, you will be happy with the permission of the previous guest to say, yes, you can contact this person, or you can contact that person, and get the, you know, check out the kashrut. You know, if you're in doubt, make contact with the hashgacha, with the agency that's providing the hashgacha, and ask them directly, are you providing the hashgacha, etc., etc. So I think all those things are really, really important. I mean, I don't know if David or you want to add anything as we draw this to a close, because our time is running short, but I think those are really important things.
I will, the only thing I'll add, Raphi, is that, you know, the famous buyer beware. It's very important. You're spending a lot of money. Make sure you know what you're getting. Do your research, speak to people, like you said, read testimonials. We're happy. As an example, people ask us, we give them names and emails of people. We don't call them in advance and tell them you're going to get a call from somebody. You know, it's random, and you call up and be honest. And then you've got to
also add, as a customer, you can ask the operator, can I see a copy of your previous year's program? What information do you send out to your clients? Can I see the Tudat Kashrut? May I speak to the Mashgiach if that's important to you, as you said, Raphi?
Yeah.
People should ask questions. If the operator doesn't have time for you to answer your questions, that's something that you should be concerned about.
And I think one more thing, you all touched on it, is that the cultural difference between the operator and the guests has to be clear. If you're French, you should be targeting the French. If you're Israeli, you should be targeting Israelis. What some of these Israeli operators do, they get some guy in the office who speaks English, someone who's made Aliyah, and then they're selling the program, but that's fine. But when you get to the program, there's no English concierge, there's no English service, no one.
Signage is all in here.
You're on your own. You're on your own.
Ask the questions.
Yeah.
Listen, David and Chana Wallace, koshertravelers.com, a phenomenal program operator, been around for, as we said at the beginning, for decades, not just Pesach, but kosher travel programs all year round. Check them out. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Raphi.
And hatzlacha with everything you do in the future.
And
thanks for explaining. Thanks for explaining with so much clarity what it takes to run a program, how you make it successful, what to look out for. You know, how to make sure you get the best out of it. And I think people will find it fascinating. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great week.
All the best.
Take care. Bye-bye.